Okay, our next speaker is Professor Andrew Palmer. Professor Palmer has been doing research in the horse racing industry, and he'll be talking about that research here. He has over 20 years' experience in health economics and outcomes research, and is a widely published and internationally respected health economist. He studied medicine at the University of Tasmania and worked at the Launceston General Hospital and then as a GP in Sydney. In 1994, he moved to Switzerland, where he was a researcher and medical director of the Institute for Medical Informatics and Biostatistics until 2000. He co-founded CORE, which is the Centre for Outcomes Research in Switzerland, and in 2000 was CEO until 2005 before moving back to Tasmania. In addition to his work in the horse racing industry, he has conducted research and published extensively in disease areas including obesity and bariatric surgery, aged care, diabetes, kidney disease, heart disease, bicycling incidents, osteoporosis, alcoholism, multiple sclerosis and oncology. Andrew was appointed Honorary Fellow of the Menzies Institute in December 2008 and New Star Professor of Medical Research. He is the founding chair of the Health Economics in August 2009. Andrew and his team were recently awarded a grant from WorkCover, and I think this is important. WorkCover are doing a lot of work behind the scenes, I suppose, with research and with their grants program. This is an example and a wonderful case study. He looked at injuries to jockeys, and he'll give us an overview of his findings. This grants program, by the way, has been operating now for 4 years, and this is just one example. So, ladies and gentlemen, Professor Andrew Palmer.
Thanks, Alan. It's my pleasure to be here this morning. I'm going to share with you some of the results of our research that's been conducted over the last 5 or 6 years by my team. I'm going to be presenting work that's been done by some of my colleagues as well as some of my own work, Dr. Peter Hitchens and Dr. Beverly Curry, so acknowledgement to them. I promise I'm not going to eat any lemons or jockeys or horses or anything like that during the presentation. And as Alan mentioned, a lot of this work was funded by a $50,000 grant from WorkCover that allowed us to actually work with WorkCover, analysing claims data to come up with some of our risk assessments and costs of jockey falls and accidents all over Australia. So thoroughbred racing really contributes quite substantially to our Australian economy, with providing many thousands of full-time equivalent jobs, contributes over $1 billion per year in taxes to the federal government. And despite this, in Tasmania there's only actually been WorkCover coverage of jockeys in Tasmania since 2007. It started actually in New South Wales, Victoria and Queensland in 2002, but only available in South Australia and Tassie since 2007. There's a problem. Jockey injuries are a fact of life at the racetrack, but there are lots of unanswered questions, or there were lots of unanswered questions that we've been able to address using this funding. What are the actual risks of falling for jockeys and injuries? What kind of things increase that risk or predispose to those risks? What are the costs of those falls to society, to WorkCover, etc.? And what policy changes can we possibly recommend to decrease those risks? So maybe a show of hands, who's actually been to the races? Yeah, so probably just about everyone. And for most people, the experience of going to the races is having a flutter, having a sherbet, having a good time, most importantly wearing a silly hat. And in the background you can see some horses ridden by jockeys there. Is anyone directly involved in the racing industry here? Okay, are there any jockeys here who'd maybe stand up on your chair? No? Okay. So, this is mainly fun. There are, of course, some inherent risks of spectating. but they mainly just appear on Facebook or Instagram or your favourite social media. For the jockeys, though, there are serious risks undertaken every time they go out and ride the horse. So man versus beast. You got the man, or these days very often a woman, weight 50 kilograms. They're about 2.5 to 3 metres off the ground, travelling at between 50 and 80 kilometres an hour. Versus the beast, the horse. So we're only looking at thoroughbred racehorses here. They weigh roughly 500 kilograms. As I said, speed over the ground 50 to 80 kilometres an hour. The thing I didn't put on this picture was the size of the horse's brain, because it probably wouldn't actually show up. It's about the size of a walnut. So that leads to a couple of kind of behavioural things. So horses have good memories, but they're not good thinkers. They're not good problem solvers. When something frightens them or they're not sure about something, their natural reaction is to jump sideways, lash out, rear up, bite. So fairly simplistic, mainly reflex behaviours, which lead to a lot of implications on the racetrack and around the racetrack. Now, if things do go wrong for a jockey on the racetrack during a race, things can go horribly wrong. So you can see the 500 kilogram horse. You've got the jockey going about 80 k's an hour, about to do a face plant into the turf. You've got other horses coming up behind. If that horse doing a backflip could land on the jockey, there's potential for life-threatening injuries there. So I'll just run a little clip. If you keep your eye on first this guy in the white, just towards the last third of the field, and then the carnage just unfolds after that. So I think if I press, not that. Helped? I just flip through. There's the guy upside down. Okay. And I think I've missed a technician over there. Can you maybe press the... Okay. So if you just watch the guy, he goes down, the horse goes down, face plant, trodden on, kicked, everyone's losing balance, falling over, people getting sandwiched between two horses, stomped on, and then people just falling off because they're in that precarious, perched up position, basically clinging on just with their calves. So anything that's going to kind of make the horse dip, dive, get unbalanced will potentially lead to a jockey coming off. At the time I wrote this slide, there were about 307 jockey fatalities in Australia from 1847 to present. I think that's gone up by 4 in the last couple of years. So on average, about 2 jockeys are killed every year. So how often do these falls occur? And we were able to answer that by digging through race day data, work cover claims, etc. There's a difference between flat racing and jumps racing, so hurdles and steeplechases. On average, flat racing falls occur about 1 in every 240 rides. Okay, there are probably 190,000 rides around Australia, racing rides every year. In jumps racing, because of that instability, the horse doing funny things, doing unexpected things, tripping, that's 10 times higher or more than 10 times higher. So about 1 fall every 19 rides. 88% of those occur at the fence itself. So we were able to dig through and do sophisticated statistical analyses, regression analyses, etc., and find out, well, what were the predisposing things or what increases those risk of falls. So it kind of, it all makes sense and obvious at the end once you've done it. So inexperienced jockeys, so apprentice jockeys and people with a low number of rides. Inexperienced horses, so horses that are young, haven't had many races, many starts. Female jockeys, and that's probably on account of Their power to weight ratio is a little bit lower, so on average they probably have a 10% higher risk of falling compared to men. Lower race grades, which can indicate several things, including horse experience, etc. Shorter race distances, so the horses are going much faster, a little bit more unstable. If you come off, it hurts even more. And the same thing, drier track rating, so allowing horses to go much faster. So just to illustrate that first point, you can see on the bottom axis we've plotted the number of career rides. So these guys over here have less than 50 versus almost 2,000 over on the right. And the risk of falls per 100 ride. You can see quite clearly that trend, that the more experienced you become and you manage to survive, then your risk of falls fall by about 50%. So these I like to call the stairways to heaven, and for jockeys, unfortunately, there are several stairways to heaven. This particular graph is really plotting the combined effect, I guess, of jockey experience versus horse experience, so previous starts by the horse. So over this side you can see the jockey's career rides. On this axis you can see the previous starts by horses, and then the height of that column reflects that the number of, or the risk of falls per ride. So if you're an experienced rider with more than 2,000 rides, riding a horse with more than 30 starts, the risk is fairly low. If you happen to be an apprentice jockey, inexperienced jockey with not very many rides, riding an inexperienced horse this coming Saturday, you've got pretty good reason to be starting to get nervous. Okay, so that's that main column there. So the next stairway to heaven, the combined effect of jockey experience and race grade. So we put three different ways of grading the races. So maiden means the horse has never won a race before, so maiden races. Open horses never won a race. The class races, so you have class 1 to 6. If you won one race, you can go in class 1. 2 races, you go in class 2, etc., up to race class 6. And open and restricted. So a restricted race would be like the Hobart Cup or the Melbourne Cup, where you have to qualify on the amount of prize money you've won, etc. Again, versus the career rides of the jockey. So in the maiden classes, where the horses are again less experienced, lower quality horses, you have higher risk across the board. And again, if you have less rides and riding in a maiden class race, your risk is much higher than an experienced jockey in an open or restricted race. And as I mentioned before, jockeys riding in sprint races are at a much higher risk just because of that increased velocity of the horse going down the track. So where our cooperation with WorkCover really helped was working out the costs of jockey falls. So obviously there's a database in each state of those costs. What are the costs of the claims of each claim? I think I mentioned that New South Wales, Victoria started WorkCover in 2002, Tassie, South Australia in 2007. So we were able to look at, over those time periods in all those different states, 2,900 odd Australian jockey compensation or insurance claims. They turn out to be a fairly staggering $8.6 million per year, the total amount. That's including the direct medical costs, the salary replacement, rehabilitation costs, all of those kind of costs. $8.6 million a year. So there were about 770 claims per year. There were about 0.6 claims per 1,000 rides for flats, and again 10 times higher claims rate for jumps races. The most commonly reported injuries were limb fractures, soft tissue and muscular injuries, and contusions, so cuts and bruises. What was really interesting, and it kind of revealed a hidden cost to racing, the majority of those claims are actually non-race day claims. So around the stables, getting horses in and out of stables, in the yards, doing track work, all of those kinds of things. But the average cost claim was about $20,000. 39% of claims were race day incidents, and they had a higher cost claim again, cost per claim. Again, that's probably because the horses are hurtling down the track with a much greater chance of severe injury. On average, jockeys were absent for about 9 weeks following a claim. Again, a differential between flats and jumps races. You've got those big horses leaping over things, squashing you basically, so you get a little bit more squashed when you're doing a jumps race. So the next thing we did was, okay, we know the costs of different kinds of claims, we know the probabilities and what kind of things affect them of having a fall. We developed some decision analysis software, quite a sophisticated analysis, and said, okay, what if we implement some new policies and demonstrate the impact on the risk of falls and also the total cost to the racing industry in Australia. So I'll just show you two. So policy, we compared to the current situation versus a new policy. One, restriction of any apprentice jockeys riding in maiden races. Policy two, restriction of any apprentice jockeys riding horses with less than 5 previous starts. So that's trying to eliminate those two stairways to heaven, if you will. So the status quo, about 190,000 rides per year, 769 falls per year, $4.5 million per year in just race day claims. Policy one, restricting to no apprentices in maiden races. We have 5% less falls with about $3.8 million in savings to the Australian racing industry. Quite a substantial saving. And the other policy, again, restricting falls, reducing falls by about 4.6% and nearly $4 million per year. $500,000 per year in savings. Obviously, that assumes that there are sufficient more experienced jockeys to step in and take the place of those apprentice jockeys in those particular classes or types of races. So, implications and recommendations following this. So we came up with quite a few. More severe injuries occur during the race. Most falls occur on race day pre or post race, so in the mounting yard, warming up after the race is finished. Currently, the ambulance only follows the race from the start of the race, jumping out of the gate to the end of the race, and then drives off. We recommend that the ambulance should actually follow them from the mounting yard to the finishing enclosure, so at least they're there to first aid straight away. We saw the impact of restricting early career jockeys from riding maiden races or inexperienced horses. Maybe we should provide better training and conditioning for both flat and jumps jockeys. Maybe minimum standards or testing for jockeys' experience and ability. More thorough education of the horses so that they have more practice rates in reduced fields, etc., before they're actually allowed onto the track. And really we need to continue to collect objective medical and falls data as we go along so that we can compare over time. So this funding by WorkCover has allowed us to quantify the risks, identify these predisposing factors and possibly make policy changes, quantify the costs, we really identified these hidden non-race day costs as well to the racing industry. So this is the sad bit and the realistic bit. To our knowledge, the racing industry is yet to implement any of these recommendations. So this networking opportunity may be where the messages filter through, people discuss and so on. On the good side, so I like to finish on a positive note, we have baseline data on risks of falls, so if we do implement any changes, we can now see the impact over time. So a big thank you to WorkCover, the Australian Racing Board, State Principal Racing Authorities, Australian Jockeys Association, and to the jockeys themselves. So spare a thought for them next time you're at the races, enjoying the day. Thank you.